Today, we started a discussion on a part of our history that turns out to be yet another half-truth. This discussion was so deep that we broke it into part 1 and a part 2. The story of Claudette Colvin causes me to rethink the Black history I think I know. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, ultimately bringing an end to bus segregation in Montgomery. That lie has been told over and over and over again until it has become a truth. Listen as we try to figure out when this story was introduced into schools and why we were given Rosa Parks as the face of bus desegregation in Montgomery, Alabama. Listen, the truth is available and the information is available. We just don't look. We must do better. Good evening and welcome to the You Don't Know What You Don't Know podcast. This is an educational podcast that provides information on past and present historical events. These are events that shape the perspective of Black Americans and their experience as citizens of this United States of America.
We were supposed to have a panel today. Only one call. She'll be tuning in later. Nobody else called to say what they were going to do. Is that typical of our people? Commit to something and then when you don't do it, don't even let people know you're not going to do it. Okay. Today's session is going to be about Claudette Colvin. She is the person in 1955 who refused to give up her seat to a white woman on a city bus. And actually, I had not heard about this woman until much, much later, like this year. She refused to give up her seat 9 months before Rosa Parks did. As a matter of fact, Claudette's case is the one that went to the Supreme Court and ended bus segregation. I didn't know that. Never heard of Claudette. I'm kind of struggling through this because we were supposed to have panel participation. So I'll just say that some things, this is one thing I did not know, that Rosa Parks came after Claudette Colvin. And the fact that Claudette was only 15 years old when she refused to give up her seat. And I just, I don't quite understand why she did not get any recognition. But Rosa Parks did mention that I guess during this period, Claudette was in high school. Claudette was pregnant, and they didn't think that would be a good image for the civil rights movement. And that's partly what our program was supposed to be about today. You know, do you think that would have been a bad image for the movement? Maybe she was pregnant, but what did that have to do with her right to have a seat on the bus where she paid her fare? That was in March 1955. As I said, Claudette was 15. And in 1956, Claudette, along with Aurelia Browder, Susan McDonald, Mary Smith, and Janetta Reese, challenged bus segregation in Montgomery. The case was called Browder versus Gale. So those women were the ones who actually ended the bus boycott. Janetta Reese, by the way, she dropped out of the case. I understand that her family was being harassed. Okay, now that was in 1956. And Colvin, she testified before the district court, the United District Court, where the judges determined that the laws requiring bus segregation, that they were unconstitutional. Then the case went to the Supreme Court on appeal, and the Supreme Court upheld the district's ruling. And it says 1 month after the Supreme Court upheld that ruling, Montgomery and the state of Alabama ended bus segregation. And then you would think you would hear something about Claudette and the other 3 women, but you don't. And for many years, the Black leaders said nothing about Claudette. Among themselves, they said that she was unmarried, she was pregnant during the proceedings. But that was it. That, I guess, that was a sign of the times. And I don't really understand that, because I know so many women in my age bracket, and actually I think 2 years younger than Colvin. It was not uncommon for young women in high school to get pregnant. I think that was the reason that the Black organizations did not publicize the fact that Claudette had refused to give up her seat months before Rosa Parks did. And some of the reasons given were that I guess the color of her skin, she was dark, the nappiness of her hair, all opposite to Rosa Parks, who was fair-skinned and had what was called good hair. And one thing I'd like to mention is that Colvin never, ever cited any kind of resentment against Rosa Parks. Every time I've seen her on TV, she's just given her propers. She's only can't understand why she was totally ignored. So, and the other thing that was interesting to me was Colvin was a member of the NAACP Youth Council. Her mentor was Rosa Parks. And I thought that was very interesting. And I just wonder, what would we do today if a 15-year-old came forward and challenged the bus system, but she happened to be pregnant and she happened not to be married, what would we do? Do you think Rosa Parks should have spoken out and given Claudette credit?
Okay, my answer would be we don't know the circumstances because Claudette and her sister Delphine, as I recall, had a very difficult life. I think their parents had died or the mother had died. They'd been given away to the grandmother and then the aunt, and so they were raised by, I think, their aunt and uncle. And so that's
Yes.
the name they took on, I think, was the Colvin, as I recall from the documentary. But first of all, we don't know what their circumstances were. We don't really know whether or not Claudette would have liked to have been in the forefront at that time, being such a young woman. I think since Rosa Parks and Claudette were both in the NAACP, and because Claudette was in the youth council and Rosa, I believe, was on the board or whatever the NAACP calls their little local boards. So we don't know, number one, what the background is and what Claudette was willing at that time at 15 to expose. Number two, I did not realize that it was common for young girls at that age to be pregnant in high school. Because everybody that I was ever around, it was always hidden. Like if you got pregnant when you were young, either you had a shotgun wedding or nobody even knew you were pregnant. And sometimes the babies were even given away to the family and the girl would show back up again like nothing ever happened. And you'd never learn that until years later. So I believe that what we need to really know is what did the NAACP, and it was the only organization that I know of that was involved at the time, back in that early in the 1950s. What did they ever really meet on it? And because Rosa Parks did it 5 months later, did the same thing, whether or not Rosa Parks should have brought Claudette's name up. So I'd say we need to know more information. And here's the sad part to me. Claudette her record never got expunged until 2021. That's 2 years ago. That to me is the travesty.
I'm just happy it happened in her lifetime.
Right.
You know how we always do stuff afterwards, and it happened in her lifetime and she was able to see and feel it. So I was happy about that. But for me, a 15-year-old back in that time when we had so much respect for our elders and our elders, we had so much for our respect for our elders. I thought that the fact that Claudette at 15 stood up to the adults that were giving her an instruction, it was a wrong instruction, it was an unfair instruction, and it was unjust. But the fact that it was coming from adults, what I saw was a young person, a rebellious young person. And so to put her out in the forefront of a movement so important, I think that would have been a miscalculation on the part of it was the Montgomery Improvement Association and the NAACP. I think that would have been a miscalculation on them. I think choosing Rosa Parks at 52 and having been in the organization for years, I think that they made a move that would ensure success of what they were trying to do. And because that was so important, I think that's why they chose her. I think eventually she should have been, or I would like to have seen her brought up and introduced. But again, she moved. And so we don't know at what point did she leave the state to go to New York. But I definitely think that we should have known about her sooner. But that goes back to what I say. The reason Black people, Chinese people, Indian people, Native American people, the reason we don't know our history and what really happened, and we allow people to give us our history is because we're so busy trying to integrate. And so you get white history. when you allow white people to teach you your history, and that's all these other people, because all I knew about Chinese people was they came here to work on the railroad and work in kitchens. That's not Chinese history. And we know now, but as a kid, that's all we were taught. Black history, same thing. We weren't taught that. And I'm going to say this, going back, one of the things that I was trying to figure out was the story of Rosa Parks. Because I wasn't taught that in school, the story of Rosa Parks and the bus boycott. I wasn't taught that in school. Somewhere in the latter years after I graduated, and I'd have to even ask my daughter if she was taught that story came out. How and why did it come out, and when? Did our Black heroes play out and they needed to throw another one up in front of us? Another kind of sort of not true? So that was my question on it too. And when I say that, we know about Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, who else? George Washington Carver, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. So, then they throw in Rosa Parks. Because I know that wasn't, like I said, I know that wasn't taught when I was in school. So I was just wondering. But back to Claudette, I think it was a strategic move for something very important to not use a volatile teenager to push the movement. That's what I think.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that because, well, I guess I do to a certain point, but to take 66 years before she's recognized, I don't understand.
I agree with you on that point.
Okay, but when you say before she was recognized, by whom are you speaking? Because she has been recognized.
Not as much as Rosa Parks, nowhere
exactly. Not as much as Rosa Parks, but she has been recognized. Because I even knew about, well, I had a little different circumstance. Cleo, you know my father, and my father basically taught us every single thing about every Black person who did anything, and no matter where they were in the world, because of the newspapers. Like I'm trying to think of the ones he would always bring up. Well, the Jet, the Ebony. He would bring up the Philadelphia, the Courier. Anyway, those magazines and newspapers, there was some Inquirer, Chicago Defender. But those newspapers, my father read them religiously and then would call his friends that he went to school with down south, and they would talk about it. So then my father would teach us. He'd say, yeah, those dirty suckers, blah, 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 blah. And he would tell us what was going on. So just like you all are doing what you're doing now with these podcasts, guess what? That's the same thing that parents really ought to be doing, but you're fulfilling
Absolutely.
that. Really, that's
absolutely.
You're doing what people in every household should be doing because they don't do it anymore. And there needs to be dialogue like you're doing. So that's how you find out about the Claudettes. But she was spoken of. But that's why I said, by whom are you asking should she have been recognized?
So Elva, what you said, my contention has always been the educational system is really messed up. And when I say it's messed up, because education should start at home. And basically that's what you're saying. You were taught the history that was never taught in school. So that's what should happen. Our schools should help us teach our children, but as parents, it's our responsibility to make sure they know who they are and what they are. Go into a Jewish home and ask those kids anything about themselves and their history, and they can tell you. Go into our house, they're going to say Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, JFK. That's what we're going to say, JFK.
Right. How many have you ever gone to? I don't have any children, but how many PTOs and PTAs have when you go to them, when you had your children when they were coming up, how many other parents did you see there of color?
And my daughter and granddaughter, because I was there for both of them, they went to mixed schools. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was unbelievable if you broke it down to how many of which demographic. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. What are we doing? Because that's really part of the solution. Part of the solution of letting our children not let a Claudette Colvin get pushed aside again.
Yep.
Is for parents in the home, and then for parents and even non-parents, even though I'm not I didn't birth children. I have lots of
Mm-hmm.
nieces and nephews. I have
Mm-hmm.
neighbors. I have
You
actually
have
gone to
my five.
huh?
You have
You got,
my five.
yeah. Plus your
There you go.
grandchildren. So really, and it's really funny because even when Cleo's kids were small, they see me coming, they say, here she
Mm-hmm.
comes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because that's really how we ought to be. And
Absolutely.
we can't blame anybody else because we need to get on school boards. It's the easiest
Mm-hmm.
board to get on. It's the easiest one. So that's my 2 cents about that.
Yeah.
So you you both are in agreement that Claudette should not have been at the forefront at age 15.
Not for success of the movement, but I think that you have to agree it shouldn't have taken 66 years. Everybody should know about her. If you say Rosa Parks to any culture of people, they know who you're talking about. It should be the same for Claudette. That's what I'm saying. Because if you think about it, when this Supreme Court decision was made, the boycott is not really what ended the bus segregation. It was the Supreme Court decision. And so if you look at the Supreme Court decision and whose name's on there, Rosa Parks is not on there. So for me, that's huge right there. How could that miscarriage of justice have happened?
Well, you can also look at the same thing. Claudette is not the only person who is not known for being the true hero or heroine of any of the legislation. Brown versus the Board of Education. Who really? I mean, I think that you all could do a series on not just Claudette, but you could go through every major legal decision.
Mm-hmm.
You find the same thing. You dig up people, you think, oh my goodness, is that who really did it? Even in the contemporary world, who really are the people who help discover the true criminals? It's not who's in the media.
Mm-hmm. And this is so amazing. It's amazing how everything is right in front of us. Everything is in a book. Everything is in a story. Everything is in a PBS documentary, but we don't know. It's like, I don't know. Is it by design? I bet you we could tell you about TikTok. I bet you we could tell you about Facebook.
Yes.
Tell you all those things, but the things that really matter as far as moving us as a people, and that's everybody in the world. That's all people.
Right.
That's an all-inclusive statement. We're so busy in that nonsense, that social media stuff that we're not living. We don't understand where we came from. We don't have a good foundation because you grow from that foundation.
Okay. Do you guys remember? And this is really relevant, even like to the Claudette story. Do you remember when it hasn't even been 20 years ago, when everybody was really concerned, educational system was really concerned about brown and black people, particularly, not knowing how to use a computer? Do you guys remember that? It's like they were really concerned. The digital divide. And then guess what? You get a Facebook, a My Life, and what happened? We know how to operate a computer and TikTok better than anybody. So yes, I agree with you. It's by design. It's by design. They went after what they thought we would just love. We would just eat it up.
Mm-hmm. And every now and then they throw
right.
something in to pacify us every now and then.
Yep.
So who comes after Rosa Parks? But as soon as we see the next thing come out, we need to be checking it out. So when the next Rosa Parks story come out or the next whoever story come out, we need to be checking it out. We really do, because it's like somebody spoon feeds us something and we take it hook, line, and sinker.
What happened to the digital divide?
Well, again, there is no digital divide, but it's been focused again on nonsense instead of taking that device and looking up, okay, Rosa Parks, who was she, where, and going back and say, hey, what about these other four ladies? Hey, Rosa Parks really didn't, the boycott, we don't do that.
Because that's how we learn to create our future, is by understanding the past.
Mm-hmm.
Then we cannot repeat those, because if we keep repeating the same thing, we're doomed.
And we are. If you go ahead, Sister Cleo, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, sometimes I think we're doomed anyway, especially looking at this present generation. They don't have an interest in anything but TikTok and whatever those other programs are called. It's like, don't you care about where we're going? Where are we going? Don't nobody care. Nobody cares but the older generation.
But my granddaughter, her iPhone, we have iPhones, and so they show your screen time per week, right? Now, my granddaughter works, but she still manages to get over 13 hours a day of screen time. How do you?
A day.
A day. A day.
I don't think you should have ever brought that up now. Look at Cleo's going to really.
Well, I understand that because you can talk to anybody from her generation. These people will be on the phone doing stuff while you're trying to hold a conversation with them.
Yep.
I just think somewhere along the line, we should have put our foot down about how much time you can spend on social media.
And I got her down to 8 one time, but she's back up at 13 and over a day. And I'm stressing that a day.
So are you guys saying that we have a problem with parenting?
Yes. Yeah, I'm definitely saying that.
You know what? I think it goes back further than parenting. I think it goes back to, for me, taking discipline out of the schools. Then they took discipline out of the homes. You have no control over your children. They threaten parents with, if you discipline your children, you can go to jail. So they've taken all of the safeguards. They've taken church out of school. They've pretty much taken church out of homes. Everybody's distracted with nonsense. So there you have it. That to me is the problem, because you don't dare. Now, if you see a kid in the mall doing something wrong and you say something, he liable to jump on you because they have no respect. He liable to jump on you. His parents liable to jump on you. The police liable to put you in jail. Nobody could say anything about anything. And then they're wondering why people are running around stabbing and killing and shooting and doing all kinds of, what's the word? Debauchery. You know what I'm saying? People are just out of control, because you have to discipline. To me, is something that you learn in layers. As a baby, your parent tells you no. And, from there, you learn what you can and can't do. You learn cause and effect. You learn, that for every action, there's a reaction. You do that, you get your butt whooped. You do that, you get punishment. We don't do that anymore. We count. All right, what did I tell you? 1, 2, we do silly stuff like that. And the kid waits until you get to 2.5 before they do it, because it's a game to them.
Well, so we don't have time anymore. We don't have time anymore, because just like the kids are on social media while you speak to them and talk to them, parents are too. Parents are on social. I have grandsons. One is 34, and the whole time you're talking is social media, and he has kids.
And they see that.
I have seen kids in the mall in a stroller with a little play phone.
Yeah, they know how to work it.
And they know how to work it. Does he know his ABCs? If he can work a phone like that when he's in a stroller, he should be able to add and subtract too.
Right.
With no problem.
Well, Cleo, I hope that you're not right. When you started out, you said there is no hope. It sounds like we got to be able to do something, though, because otherwise it's going to be over.
I know.
So what are some of the things that we can do? You know what? I'm going to tell you the truth. I personally think number one is we need our own academies. And it's mandatory that these children learn some discipline, and you send them to the academy for at least the first 4 years of their life. And that's going into everybody. And you know what? There's all kind of money available where we could build these free schools and have these schools built up where you can, in your own school, do things like a certain amount of discipline, have regiments. It's got to happen. That's where it's, because the first few years of your life, that's it. It sets you up for life. It's proven.
We must do better. Yeah, I said it. But what does it mean? I think we have to start seeing each other as humans, as people having value, and that value is not based on our skin color or what we're wearing. I think as Black people, we have to step up, stand up, take back the right to rear our children, to make sure our children are productive, make sure they know where they came from, what they're about, and what their worth is. We have to create our own schools. That's just my thought. But in part 2, let's talk about it.